habit and routine often seem to carry a lot of luggage with right.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello. My name is Ellie Dodds and I am co-presenter, and today Joe's interviewing Mike Horne. Mike Horne, PhD, is the author of Integrity by Design, Working and Living Authentically. He helps leaders and their teams bring their best in every situation. An accomplished global executive and expert in authentic leadership, Mike opens doors and possibilities for personal and professional change and growth. Mike's work helps leaders to build trust, open communication and make strides in their accomplishments. Mike is the host of the Authentic Change podcast. Back to the studio. Today I'm interviewing Mike Horne. Welcome, Mike. Thanks for joining me. I nearly called you Mark then after having said your name was Mike. Thank you for joining me, Mike.
I'm glad you repeated my name 3 times, so that's fine. In the air, that is something I take no offense to.
No.
Usually I find myself sometimes in rooms where there is more than one Mike, but certainly usually not someone like me. So I'm so glad to be able to join your podcast, Joe, and to engage in the discussions around counterpoints and careers and authenticity and integrity. I have a new book launching on May 11th, Integrity by Design, Working and Living Authentically. And it's a blueprint for people who want to be able to bring more of who they are to what they do. In the book, I go back to 3 references that Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst, made. And the first is that you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. And I think there's a lot of wisdom, and we can go down a lot of paths around exploring that topic about what it means for my personal, my intimate, and my professional and organizational life. It's what you say that matters. It's what you do that matters, not what you'll say you'll do. And his second observation was that the greatest gift in life, and I'm going to paraphrase this, is the ability to become who you are.
Okay.
And I think many people, when I've asked them, when we've done some polling in a recent webinar that I did with Bev Kay, the author of Love 'Em or Lose 'Em and many other books on career development, people tend to say that, I can be more authentic, I can be my more whole self, my more complete self when I'm at home and not at work. So I just wonder, what's on the table there, particularly for people who want to lead in a way that makes a difference and that values participation and democracy, some of the things that I'm all about, which are often antithetical in organizations. And yet, if you can find leaders who know that all creation, all value creation is accomplished through people, then it's so important to focus on these relationships. So that second point again of, the greatest gift of a lifetime is to become the person you are. Let's see what we can do with that to, integrate that. And the third point that Jung made is that you can't do anything about any of this unless you're willing to accept where you are today. And I think maybe that's, those are 3 pathways, having listened to briefly to some of your podcasts that, where we might find an intersection. And I'm reminded of when I say the word intersections, of something that one of my mentors said, is that all intersections in life can be improved. And that's another story. We can get into that.
Lovely.
So tell us, you've started to tell us a bit about obviously the book and some thoughts around that. Tell us what you do and where you do it.
Right now, I'm leading the human resources team for the research division of Gilead Sciences, which has been an amazing company, antiviral company. And they've were in the news recently with remdesivir treatment, potential treatment for coronavirus, but a company that made a difference in HIV and hepatitis C and certainly other disease areas. So leading a team of HR folks in that organization, really had a strong corporate career with lots of marquee companies on it, and also am now a coach to leaders who are aspiring to lead and work authentically, or maybe, in other words, to make the complex a little less overwhelming.
Yeah. And where are you based?
I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the East Bay, in a town called Pleasanton, California.
Lovely, excellent. So one of the first questions I ask my guests is how did this all come about? So sort of what's the backstory to what you're doing now? And you're obviously doing two sort of related but different things. We were talking just before we came on about portfolio careers, as those of us
right
who various
love
unrelated
that term.
things we use. But tell us about how you got to where you are now.
My interest as a young child was in how people mediated disputes. And I'm not sure of the origin story about all of that. I didn't have, I wasn't raised in a stressful home. But I got involved early on as an early teenager, in the United Farm Workers lettuce boycott, and had the opportunity to meet Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. So labor management relations was an interest of mine, because I thought that out of all the muck that exists, maybe there was always a way for people to find some harmony. And I guess maybe because I was in an environment that supported the healthy development of feelings, then that idea about creating harmony just made sense for me. And I think that's where my path has taken me, whether it's been as a corporate executive or a consultant to significant corporations, trying to do great things with great people in bringing more of who they are to what they do. So maybe that is the backstory. Maybe that is the origin story. And I haven't, I think a lot of us, and I wonder if you do, Joe, you think about brand and you think about personal brand. Do you think about personal brand? Going back to this like portfolio careers, and what does that mean for you? I'm curious. I mean, good. I think one of the things, as I've talked with people about the Mike Horne brand, is to understand the differentiators that are there.
Yeah, I mean, do I think about personal brand? Yes. Would I have thought about it if I wasn't already in business? Probably no.
Right.
So, I think about brand because I have a business. Would I have thought about myself in, like, when I had a corporate career and all that sort of stuff? Did I think about it in those terms? Probably not. I mean, I probably worried what people thought about me, but I wouldn't have seen it in that way, I don't think.
And so interesting. And I just want to pick up on that, because for me, you touched the heart in saying that, of course, you think about brand as a business person, but maybe not in that context. We do care about what others think about us. And that, if authentic leadership, which is where my coaching practice is built to help individuals solve problems more effectively and help them improve their relationships. Yeah, I think it might be summarized in 2 bullet points. The first is that in order to make a difference, you have to care about it. If you don't care, then nothing's going to happen. And secondly, then maybe what underscores that as well is that you have to be willing to put in the work.
Yes.
And I think that can show up in all kinds of different pathways, regardless of whether you're in some corporation or you're working in the public service or you're working in the third sector or some other ways of thinking about it. I think all of us, and that's what authentic leaders bring to an organization, to a team, is they have a value system that places dignity in the individual, that respects the individual, that values the differences and includes those differences, and works in ways that create equity within the systems that they engage and are part of.
So when you say do the work, what do you mean? What is the work? What do people need to do? And does it differ depending on if you are in a corporate role or run your own business or don't do either of those things?
A couple ways that I think about that. I'm curious as to how you might engage with me on this topic. Is I grew up in an era when people used to talk about work-life balance, and all of us knew that was just nonsensical, because there is never balance. Sometimes your personal life, your family life, it takes over. It consumes the space that you have, and other times it's all about work. So the idea that you can balance those, I don't think it really works. So then we move to the whole concept of blend, right? Can you create a good blend, a good mix that facilitates the expression of your talent and your creativity and your purpose? So I think that for leaders, it is built around those kinds of principles. What do you think?
Yeah. I've just gone off on a tangent in my head to the point where I'm thinking, I think so we're all a combination of everything that we experience. I agree with you about the work-life balance thing. I don't call it that either. I call it integration, because I don't think you want it to be balanced anyway, because certain things are important at certain times, and you need to sort of act accordingly rather than trying to get it all even and the same, because that makes it quite a boring sort of life. And that I mean, you talked before we came on that you were asking about when the end of my working day was, and I was saying how odd I am in that I have a very strange sort of daily schedule, which I've talked about many times on the podcast. I'm a night bird. I work quite often late into the night, early morning, and I get up late in the morning, and I don't start doing sort of work with other people until 11, 12 o'clock and all that sort of stuff. And it's because over years I've got to know myself really well, but and I feel I have the ability, the opportunity to craft my business and my life accordingly, which we don't always have, and also I didn't have. Again, I've talked before about how I used to work quite late in my corporate jobs. I'd be still at work and everyone else was going home, and I'd stay in the office till 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and I thought I was a bit of a workaholic, or disorganized and didn't get everything done in the time I had available, etc., etc. I now realize it's just because I was getting a second wind to my focus time when everyone else was going home. It was my focus time, and I didn't know that, but I do know that now. And so I shape my business accordingly. But of course, in a corporate role, I wasn't able to swan around for 3 hours in the afternoon doing no work, ready for the fact that I was going to do it in the evening. So I think so much of our lives and what we do and all of this stuff is about self-awareness and
use of self as maybe
agency, as you
say, or agency or agentic behavior. But so I mean, it's what I wanted to do was, I think all of that is the background to the question that you asked around separation, authenticity in the personal and the professional life. Given that it is a blend, our choice is really to, and back to the Jung's view, it really is to choose a path. And how do you do that? I mean, how do you do that in teams? How do you do that in your intimate relationships? I think it begins by building trust. And you know, I used to have a belief that, trust goes in so many ways. Some people believe it's freely given, others believe it's earned. Um, but what I do know is that you have to work at it. It's not something that I think you can leave to chance. When I talk about integrity, I mean, I think about integrity as the notes that accentuate our lives and the choices and the decisions and the challenges that we have. And I think about authenticity is really the tempo that we have throughout all of our seasons. And integrity gets tested all the time. Not all of the time, but for many, it gets tested. I talk with somebody and they say, "Hey, is it okay to tell a white lie at work?" And I don't like that term. Let's use another term. Is it okay to tell a small truth at work? And that person would say, "Well, no, not if you want to build a trusting and trustworthy relationship with others."
Mm-hmm.
And there starts our question about integrity and what it means to act with authenticity and to so as a first step, it's really thinking about trust. It's about working on communication that isn't guarded and cautious, but that tends to be more open and transparent with people and yourself. It's about stopping, listening, reflecting. And I think when you improve relationships, when you believe that you're in a relationship with somebody that is of value, it changes the whole dynamic and improves the outcomes. And it makes people willing to do more. Yeah, do more. I'll just leave it at that. Not do more at work, not do more for you, but to do more.
So how do we sort of be authentic? How do we be honest, and how do we be the person we want to be, need to be, and all that sort of stuff when society and stuff around us doesn't always make that easy?
Well, bad systems always trump good people, right? I mean, in the U.S., I mean, not only the lingering effects and the legacy of racism, but its continuing impact and how it stratifies our American society, it's pretty deplorable. And we have to make new choices about how we promote as a society justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and where are the places in which we build those kinds of communities? We do them in the places that we work. And I'm not talking about, just mega corporations, but I'm talking about the communities of work that are so fundamental in most modern economies. The companies in groups of 2 people, of 10 people, of 20 people, and 40 people, all who have a ability to behave in ways that operate out of a strong moral and ethical foundation and use a belief in the self in order to create and to make the difference, and not only to yourself and that pursuit of becoming who you are and bringing the best to every situation, but it uplifts communities as well.
So remind me of those 3 Jungian
those observations that Jung made.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. The first is you are what you do, not what you say you'll do.
Okay, yeah.
The second is, and I'm going to paraphrase, the greatest gift in life is to become the person you are. And the third is, in order to make, you have to accept where you are in order to make a change.
Yeah. Okay, so the actions speak louder than words thing is the first one, which is so true. The amount of people who say they're going to do things and then don't.
Yeah, right. There's integrity. And we could even think integrity, as we define it, sometimes it's helpful for people to think about integrity meaning a whole cloth, right? It's the canvas. You can think about it in terms, if you're an engineer, think about it in terms of structural integrity. Things hang together. But what we know that when we act authentically, and maybe this is what distinguishes, is we have congruence in our words and actions.
Yeah. So the second one about the sort of becoming the person we are is sort of, does that imply that we can't be different to, we can't make changes?
Well, yes, we can make changes. And what I would think is that, barring an environment that is utterly hostile, right, to development, then the answer to that question has to be yes. I mean, I think that's why many people, many authentic leaders and aspiring authentic leaders have crises, because it's coming to terms with who you are and who you aren't.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, though, that, there are some people who appear to be not very nice people.
Oh, can you be an authentic jerk? Sure.
So do they just make peace with the fact that they're not very nice, or do they try and be nicer, I suppose, is my challenging question.
Well, for me, I say we need to work where it matters, right? That part of this, and I learned this from my colleague Daria Funches, is that when we're in these coaching relationships, as we are with people who are aspiring to transform, not to just have more information on how to be a better manager or a better leader, because that's already available, right? We're talking about the process of transformation. You have to show up as a coach, and for many of your listeners, home-based coaches, is what Dr. Funches identified was that you have a gift of presence that you bring. You are able to discern, and this is to your question about our conversation around authentic church. You have to bring discernment. You have to know what's working and what's not work. And then the third thing you bring to a situation is hope, a belief that a new order is possible. So I think when, are there authentic jokes? Sure. And where I choose to work is to work out with folks who have a basis in humanistic values, that they want to see others succeed, that they know that their success is linked to their relationships they have with others, and that those relationships drive engagement, drive productivity, and drive positive organizational outcomes. And well, I used to think that most of what we did with folks was to reduce their suffering, to make the world to reduce some suffering, so that as a leader, as an executive, I can get through the day, and I can bring 10 people along with me, or 100 people are along with me, or 1,000 or more people along with me. And I've come to believe now that it is not about the elimination of suffering, but it is about increasing happiness. What we know about people who are congruent is that they're generally happy people. So back to authenticity. When my words and actions match, when I feel in sync with who I am and who I am becoming, then I'm not talking about the kind of happiness that comes with finding a new lover, or the birth of a child, that kind of happiness. I'm talking about sort of the day-to-day sustained happiness. And the research is quite clear on this, Joe, that authentic leaders are generally happy people, and people like to work for happy people. I mean, you've been in situations, right, where you're not working for happy people.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's that whole thing we talk a lot when I'm talking about employee engagement stuff about, and I think it's come out a lot in the last year through the pandemic, and that whole bring your whole self to work piece, and that speaks to that integrity, authenticity piece, that people, are much more aware of the real life of people that they work with that they may not have been in the past, because it's, we've gone into people's homes, haven't we, all the time on our Zoom calls and things.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
So,
it's important. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Joe, please.
So the third one was about, was that effectively self-awareness type stuff? Remind me. I can't hold three things in my head at once, obviously.
Well, authentic leaders know their agency. If we want to call that use of self, I think that's a great way to think about it. What I might think about, drawing from social psychology and other disciplines, but particularly from Lewin, is that the best way to understand a situation or a system or a person is to try and change it. I mean, you learn a lot. And that particularly comes to systems, right? When you try to create change, you can see why bringing justice to race and other areas in the U.S. is because we can't seem to, because when we try to change, the system is structured in so many ways that create unfair and unavailable opportunity.
So we've talked sort of a lot about the philosophy of what you do, and I guess you sort of touched on some of the things from your book. How do you actually work with people? What does your week and day look like, particularly as you're balancing two sort of different parts of your career?
Right. So for me, the primary focus right now is on teaching and mentoring, and that's what I was doing in my corporate role, was teaching and mentoring, even though it is leading a human resources function. I work as a teacher and a mentor, and look for seek platforms to help people be their best in every situation and to encourage their prosperity. So practically, maybe this is not the approach that I use, and it's just one of many approaches, is to help people to solve their problems more effectively, and to do that with folks in short-term bursts of 3 months or so, certainly with an eye towards different work. But I think that the reason for working with people who want to solve problems more effectively, I'm attracted to goal-oriented people who want to close the gap between what back to Jung, what they're doing and what they say they'll do. I want to work with people who want to close that gap, who want to increase their authentic leadership behavior in an organization. So that typically means, for many busy people, around solving problems more effectively, which yields to an outcome around improving relationships. So I work with people to improve the relationships they have with different parts of their worlds, and then really work towards encouraging and catalyzing that growth movement. So a lot of it's around, getting people to tell different, to create different alternatives, to explore, issues, not from just the lens that they currently hold, but from some alternative lenses. If we can get people to tell 3 different stories of how, of stories they carry around about relationships at work, or that are precluding their best, then it gives people an opportunity. Also, a lot of this is about just teaching people how to listen to learn.
Yeah. And so do you do that one-to-one? Are you doing that through Zoom at the moment, like most people?
Zoom,
or whatever?
Zoom.
So what do your days look like? How do you organize yourself? How do you make sure you get done what you get done?
Well, today's a really interesting day for me because I am talking with you, which I'm so enjoying to have an opportunity to be on this podcast with you. And then I'm working on my own podcast, interviewing a guest today. My podcast is Authentic Change. And then I'm working with a client on and his team on the blueprints, some of the blueprints that are in integrity by design. And late in the day, I'm working with an organization that's working on creating kindredness in organizations. So I'm going to explore that with them and what that means. And I don't know a whole lot about that. So that'll be a learning opportunity for me today, which is always great to build in some learning each day.
Yes. Yeah. And how do you organize yourself sort of technology wise or process wise? Do you use technology, or are you one of my pen and paper people, of which there are many?
I live in the Bay Area. I live, in the heart of Apple and Google and Silicon Valley. I'm very technology enabled.
So Google Calendar fan?
My Google Calendar fan. Unfortunately, I'm a Microsoft Outlook fan, and yeah, Google Calendar. Yeah, they all work.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting. I sort of threw that in because generally, probably 90% of my guests are sort of pen and paper for calendars, interestingly, because I'm not. And then the rest talk about Google Calendar. But it's interesting how few solopreneurs, how few people who work on their own actually use Microsoft, given we all at one stage used it.
Right.
And certainly when I started working on my own, I still used it until I got enticed away to Google. But
different organizational features. A lot of corporate clients are on Outlook systems. I mean, it just
certainly when I meet corporate clients, it tends to be Teams rather than Zoom.
Teams, Microsoft Teams, right?
Yes, which is better now than it was, to be fair.
Agreed. Agreed.
So, what about keeping yourself well and energized for the work that you do? What sort of things do you do to look after yourself?
Yes. So I am, I take a 7-mile hike every day. So that's one thing I do. I start my day with a 7-mile hike. And then usually I'll do some rowing. I'm into rowing right now. I'll do some rowing. So my day starts pretty early, maybe at 4:30 in the morning. And I work on my wellness. And then I'm in the office at 10:30.
Wow, that's
and then I just go.
Between when you get up and when you go to the office. So yeah, I'm laughing about the fact that sometimes I might even still be awake, having not gone to bed by the time you get up, and also how much exercise and the like you must be able to fit in between 4:30 and 10:30.
Right, you can. There's usually I build in some time for some reflection early as I get some caffeine going, and it takes me about an hour, and then out the door.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of living in the Bay Area.
Yes. So
pretty nice weather all year round.
Yes, I'm also intrigued. You talk about a 7-mile hike. Is it the same route? Is that how you know how long it takes, or do you just go 3.5 and then come back?
Yes, that's a great question. I vary, but right now. I just recently read Atomic Habits.
Yes.
So I have been repeating my an identical route with a mantra and then stacking some habits. So I'm really just I'm on a desire to do something in a 3-month fashion.
Yeah.
That should really be consistency, and practicing stacking that goes along with it.
Yeah. And was habits and routines, were they something that you naturally did, or has this come about because of the book? I mean, obviously you've developed it further with that book, but is it something that you've seen as important in the past already?
Habit and routine often seem to carry a lot of luggage with right. They sound like things I might want to avoid. and yet, let's take this back to leadership and authentic leadership, because there is a relationship, and you can see that in the authentic leadership literature, and behavior that is patterned and predictable yields some comfort, and authentic leaders will engage with others in ways that increase comfort, right? I mean, back to what we talked about before. I mean, that open trust pathways that favor open and frequent communication as opposed to closed and guarded communication. So I think there are pathways that get right at that point.
So it's interesting saying they sound like they've got lots of luggage with them. It's routines.
Yeah, they do, right? I mean, it's, I have, it's not for me so much keeping the to-do list, it's what you do with it.
Yes. Yeah. And they can, it can be, so freeing, but also could seem to be so the opposite, depending on, I suppose, your view. But I guess it then comes back to your first thing about you are what you do. And so you have to make sure you do stuff.
Right. And, we talked about calendars earlier. One of the things that's always guided me is that for a coach or, for the home-based consultants in the audience, one thing that keeps you honest is your calendar, or it should, right?
Yeah. So what about learning and developing yourself? What sort of things do you do? Obviously, you read books, or you certainly have read one recently.
I do read books. I'm a book fan.
Yeah.
The book that I just finished is by a UK author. It's called Solo. Have you read it?
No, I haven't. Who wrote that?
It's just terrific. It's and would be ideal for many home-based consultants. She, I can't remember. Yeah, I don't have it in front of me right now, but it's a great little book, and a lot drawn out of the experience of the past year in the pandemic, working solo. Terrific book.
Okay. I'll have to check that one out. I'm just seeing if I can quickly see it on Amazon, but not.
Yeah, right. I was wondering about that. Yeah, Solo. I think Rebecca. I can't remember her surname right now. I
was going to say making searching with just one word is never quite helpful, is it? Let's see if Solo Rebecca. Rebecca Seal, is that the one?
Right, that's it.
Here we go.
Perfect.
How to work alone and not to lose your mind.
Right.
Subtitle. That sounds good. Kind, realistic, and genuinely helpful, said the Observer. So that sounds good. That's a good one. Yeah.
Terrific little book. Really helpful, I think, for home-based folks as well. And in terms of, for example, I mean, one thing I'm doing in my own learning path right now is practicing some new habit formation. So I've been doing this on my hiking with some stacking that I'm doing in order to build some new practices that I hope improve my splits and any number of things.
So for people who haven't read Atomic Habits and aren't aware of what habit stacking is, what does that mean in real terms?
I think you find this also in the Duhigg book, and which is by taking very tiny, small behavioral actions and adding those to certain routines, you build habits.
Yeah. And
you build, let me try and think of an example. So I know that if I want to go outside every day for a hike, and this is not what I'm working on, but the most important thing is having my shoes next to my bed.
Yes.
And then it's having the coffee on, so I can have a shot of espresso with it. So it's making sure that all of those behavioral actions, can occur, and you stack them and then build the reinforcement loops.
I was thinking about going to bed in my workout gear so that I'd get up and be able to go walking without creating a load of barriers.
Yeah, people do that.
Yeah.
Hey,
I haven't followed your first thing though. I've only thought about it. I haven't actually done it.
So those are two things that I'm doing, and the third thing that I'm also focused on is always learning about sales and development.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's just a continuing, it's a continuing journey in that regard.
Yeah. So last couple of questions. So firstly, what about those days where it all goes horribly wrong? How do you deal with those days?
I have one client who says that, everything goes downhill from the time that he wakes up, and
Positive.
yeah. Yeah. I also had a client once who said, if he could figure out a way to make money without people, he would do it. So
I can see how that might be helpful at times.
So I'm an optimist by nature. I don't I don't think I'm Pollyannish. I don't but I think a lot of helping people increase their authentic behavior, helping myself to becoming the person I am, is always by knowing what worries me or what concerns me, and what can I do to have a better life if I eliminate that worry. And boy, that can be challenging, because we bring a lot of assumptions into, as Bob Keegan identified. I mean, we bring a lot of assumptions into the stories that we hold.
Yeah.
So that's why I think, one technique, in coaching is, again, getting people to have at least 3 stories about the situations they have, they're experiencing.
Yeah.
To have some alternatives, not to be so beholden to the belief that, of course I'm right.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting.
Back to your question about, are we capable of growing and changing? Of course, there's a lot that conspires against it.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny, in the spirit of tangents and random thoughts, which clearly I have a lot, as I said earlier in the interview, whilst I was looking up that solo book, one of the testimonials on there was from Gary Barlow, who you probably haven't heard of, but he's a very famous singer in the UK and songwriter, and used to be part of a boy band and all that sort of stuff. And he said he was going to buy the book because it was like perfect for him, and it was a tweet apparently. So I read that. You've just said the story, having 3 stories
right.
about the situation, and what straight away popped into my mind is he fell out with a band member, Robbie Williams, who you may have heard because he lives in America, and when they got back friends again, they wrote a song together which talks about 3 stories, something like, my story, your story, and the truth.
Right.
So
yeah.
You mentioned 3 stories. I'm like still thinking that solo book, and I've obviously seen his name go by, and now I'm thinking and singing in my head that song.
Yes.
About the concept of these stories. But it's so true, isn't it, that I have a view, the other person has a view, and then there's probably the reality of what really happened without the stuff that we put on top of what we saw and experienced, isn't there?
Yes, and for me, it takes us right back to the top of our discussion about improving intersections, right? There's your view, there's my view, and often those seem incontrovertible, right? That things can't be solved. And what I believe is that we can always find common ground. In organizations, it's often just about, looking up enough from your own grindstone to a customer. I mean, who's the customer? Who ultimately are you serving? And authentic leaders certainly choose service over self-interest.
Yes. Yeah. So my last question is, those days where you get to live more, and I define that as getting to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do, what do they look like for you?
There are days when I have at least one clear feeling. Those are what those days look like. The expression of a clear feeling, and usually a positive feeling around happiness, satisfaction, fulfillment, having had the opportunity to be of service.
Yeah. I'm glad you said.
I don't look for a lot of window dressing other than a nice, clear feeling.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said a positive feeling as well. Because I was thinking
Yes.
it wasn't such a good feeling. It wouldn't be such a good day.
How about you? What is it for you in that regard?
Mine fundamentally is very simple. It's a day where I can just read. That's my fundamental. I mean, I do like a bit of nice food and glass of wine or two,
of course,
and nice interactions with people. But actually, if I had to pick one thing, it would be being on my own reading. So there we go. It's been great talking to you, Mike. Tell people how they can find out more about you and get in touch.
Yes, thanks, Joe. The easiest way for folks to get in touch with me is through my website. It's Mike, MIKE Horne, HORNE.com. So Mike-Horne.com. And that'll have all the coordinates, or many of the coordinates. And also, another great avenue for folks to be in touch with me is on LinkedIn, where my profile is Mike, MIKE Horne, HORNE 1. So Mike Horne 1. And there you'll find access to my professional profiles and the blogging that I do there, and lots of different activities. So I'd go to mike-horne.com or visit me on LinkedIn, Mike Horne 1.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Joe. I've enjoyed this.
Attention home-based coaches and consultants. Are you stuck and not getting stuff done? Do you wish you were more organised and had more time to live more? Consider joining the Power to Live More Calm Gold membership to support you in running your home-based coaching or consulting business. You get access to our supportive community, including weekly Zoom calls, accountability, learning materials teaching you online marketing, audience building, income generating, and all sorts of other things you need to run your home-based business with ease, along with materials like templates, checklists, and planners to keep you motivated, organised, and productive. It's time to join the Power to Live More Calm Gold membership. Use the code MY1TRIAL to get the first month for £1, and then it's just £37 a month after that, with no obligation to stick around. You can cancel any time.
All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to powertolivemore.com / in this case 217, then you'll find them there. And this week it's a very short outro. I've actually been ill almost since the last podcast. I've had a gum infection and not been able to eat or talk too well. It's been very painful. Normal service will be resumed again next week. Next week's topic for the Gold Call, we're going to be talking about the book Essentialism. If you're interested in getting involved with that, then go to powertolivemore.com / get calm and use the code Please Let Me In, and you'll get the first month free. And then you can come to the Gold Call on Monday at 11. That's Monday, the 19th of July, 2021. But we do have them every week on a Monday at 11 anyway. It'll just be a different topic if you come to one of the subsequent weeks. Again, the show notes are at powertolivemore.com / 217, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.